Okay, here we are. I'm Saturday, February 22, evening in India, morning in Connecticut.
Yes, it
And
is.
we're about to have the workshop led by Carol Birch titled, It's How You Say It. It's How You Say It. And from the workshop description, I'll just read a little bit. From confiding intimacy to bold declamations, it's how we say it that may leave listeners thinking, she knows that story because she was there. We can get the words of a story right and yet fail to tell it in an engaging manner. In an engaging manner. This occurs when a storyteller does not speak with clear and vibrant attitudes. Attitudes come to life when we're talking about people we know and events that are real to us, whether it's a folk tale, a biography, history, or whatever. So, Carol Birch, please help us be real and get real. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I got rid of myself so that I can see all of you instead. Oh, wait. Oh, there I am again. Let me see. Oh, I guess
Do
because
you
you're
want to be
recording it,
enlarged?
I'm there. Yeah. Okay.
Is it okay?
All right. Yeah, that's fine. So, I am happy to be here. I love talking about this stuff. Now, when he was reading part of what I wrote, I want to go on and read what Julius Lester wrote because I put it as the first page in a book I wrote called what is it called? It's called the Whole Story Handbook, and I'm sure it costs way too much money to mail this to India, but or around the world. But I Julius Lester was a great man with a great mind, and he wrote for children as well as adults. But what he says is the failure of modern living is the failure of the imagination. The root meaning of the word imagine is to picture to oneself. In other words, when we imagine, we create an inner picture of something not visible to our physical eye. One kind of picture we are all accustomed to is an image of something we have done, something we've witnessed. This is the visual aspect of memory. It's not imagination. Imagination requires something more of us. It requires that we see what we have not seen, what we may never see, what may not even exist. It's such an amazing journey. Um, I don't want to say anything else that's political, but imagination has such an important root in empathy or an important manifestation in empathy. And if you look all around, we are having a crisis in empathy. So that will be the beginning and end of my political statements. Images promote visceral responses, don't they? If we say the word graffiti, you can just think about that. And in America here, we have spray painted subway cars, walls, and fences in urban areas. Is it art or is it graffiti? Are they different? Labeling it is one way to reveal our attitude, but how we say the word also forcefully communicates our point of view. Sometimes how we say something more forcefully communicates an unequivocal expression of our point of view, so that you can say the word art and you can say the word graffiti, and you can express your admiration or a sneering attitude, dismissive attitude by how you say it. So I guess I need to know, are you with me? I mean, does that make sense to all of you?
Yes.
Images enable us to learn stories more easily, and our attitudes allow us to tell stories more effectively. So, um, this is not the place when we go to a storytelling event, it's not the place to hear a mechanical or impassive view. I had a really interesting experience. One of the stories I used to be able to tell, I'm not allowed to now because of rights issues, is 2 chapters from The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And at the beginning he of the story, he talks about 3 different attitudes. Some of the men were sad, and some of the men were angry, and because some of the men had empathy, and some of them did not have empathy, and some of them were cold because they had found out you couldn't be an owner and not be cold. So I went to see a production of it that was made in terms of modern, not set in the 1940s story, the Great American Dust Bowl, where people left their homes because their farms literally blew away, and then banks took the land that the farm had been on. They retold that, reset it in terms of apartments in New York City. And so it was at the Brooklyn Museum, and they chose to have a mechanical voice say the lines. Some of the men were angry. Some of the men, were cold. Some of the men were sorry, but it was a mechanical vocalization. And it's so interesting that people can think sometimes that if they speak like a newscaster, if they speak without inflection, that they are somehow being dispassionate. And yet it can be very emotionally jarring to hear words spoken that way. So I also saw a study that said almost all arguments, especially between spouses, start off on a specific issue and then quickly, like within a few sentences, go into, well, I don't like the way you're talking to me about this. And then the argument becomes how people are talking, how they're saying what they're saying. It's how people talk. It's just it's so powerful how we say what we say. So,
Carol, I'm realizing the word attitude in itself has a, implication towards anger because we say he's got an attitude.
oh, well, I guess it can, but a loving attitude. I think, yeah, I think when we say he has an attitude, we almost always think that that's going to be a negative attitude.
Hmm.
But attitudes are so, there's thousands of words for different kinds of attitudes, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
So our time together here will be to help, I hope, help you discover your attitudes, and not negative attitudes, your range of attitudes towards the people and the places in the stories you're working with. And it doesn't matter whether they're true stories or folk tales or literary stories, historical stories, poetry. How we say what we say directs our listeners in a certain it leads them in a certain direction. At least it lets them know what we think. And it's very layered and very sophisticated. And we do it all the time. But what is when we're going to do these processes, these exercises, what people can suddenly think, how am I going to remember all this? But if you think about it, when you have a family dinner, and especially one of those big ones that are connected to holidays, so that you have, oh dear, oh, there's that uncle. Hey, oh, I just hate seeing that uncle. Or, oh, there's that uncle. Oh, I love seeing him. We don't have enough parties where I get to see my uncle, right? So you can be talking to your brothers and sisters or cousins or other people who know the variety of aunts and uncles and cousins who are at this gathering. And you can say, I saw our cousin in the store the other day. And the way you set it up with your voice is already foreshadowing whether or not you were horrified by how the cousin acted, or whether you were so proud of how your cousin acted when the salesperson was unpleasant. Did it turn into a situation where both of them were unpleasant? And so you just intuitively know how to arrange your face and your body and your tone of voice to communicate to your other relatives how you felt. I hope if you think about this, that you can all think of a time when you were at a gathering and somebody called up a reference like that. And you were like, yeah, it was that cousin. And everybody knows who that cousin is, right? So I want you to try this. I guess that's what my hope is for the day. That I'm going to invite you to fall into reverie, because so much, especially because I told literary stories for years and years, and I still hope I'll get to tell literary stories. But though I have permission to tell the literary stories, I don't have permission to live stream them or record them on videos, because I've been doing this a long time and we didn't have these options back when I started getting permissions. So I might have gotten permissions to do an audio recording, but certainly not a video recording. So it's gotten complicated. But I worked a lot with literary stories, and people sometimes would go like, well, I work with folktales. Well, this works with folktales too. So in my book, I'm just going to read this because I think it's useful. And I hope some of you will actually speak. If you have the line, a nothing line, the king walked into the room. Well, any of you, I hope some of you will dare to speak. I would say, when you say the king walked into the room, we should have, as listeners, because we're following you and you're leading us to see, maybe this will help. I have an image of storytelling, which is, oh, you don't know? Oh, well, do you want to look in? Yeah, we can look in and we can see it. So that's why, even though it was written in the 40s, I still learn my stories image by image, not word by word. And I struggle with, why did an author or someone tell it with that word? Because that word has emotional import, but I learn it by the images. And I struggle with, why is that the right word for the image? So anyway, we have the king. He walked into the room. And I would suggest, how is he walking? Just the way somebody says that, how is he walking? How does he feel as he approaches the room? Is it eager? Is he dreading it? Is he walking tentatively or with assurance? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he calm or angry? Or is he some combination of all those feelings? And what about the room he's entering? Is it a public room or a private room? Where is the room in relation to other rooms in his domain? Is it the normal place where the king moves? Or did he go to where the servants generally move? And will he fill the room, or will he be dwarfed by the room? What does he expect to find in the room? What does he think will happen? What will fulfill or thwart his expectations? And how do you, as the storyteller, as the narrator, feel about the king? And how do you feel about what will happen in this room? All of those things are things that the storyteller knows and reveals in saying the king walked into the room. Now, when I was a young storyteller, I would swear to you, I heard people decide how to say that sentence, what I would say artificially. So I don't know. I don't know if there's people who would be willing to say the king walked into the room. Can you put your hand up, I guess, if you are willing to say it? Do we only have one person who's willing to say the king walked in? All right. Oh, good. There's three of you. Okay. So you can say that. First, I want you to say it in like this really mechanical way that just becomes fun, which is as Rajesh. Is that how I say your name? So if you say it, just emphasizing one particular word, would you just do that? Not trying to bring all this thing, but just I want to show what happens when you do it mechanically, and then I'm going to have you do it with a perceivable attitude. But just emphasize one of the words in the king walked into the room.
The king walked into the room.
Okay, so then Ravati, can you say it choosing to emphasize a different word?
The king walked into the room.
Okay. Nina, can you say it? Oh, I'm sorry, what?
The king walked into the room. So I'm emphasizing king.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Nina?
The king walked into the room.
Aha. And Eric? What do we have?
The king walked into the room.
Right. Okay. So now if the same four people would be willing to say it, but have a picture in your head that you have an attitude about. So first of all, so your option, is he eager or dreading? Is he tentative, assured, happy or sorrowful, calm or angry, or some combination? And what does he expect to find in the room? So what happens to the pacing and the sort of the melody of that line when you have a point of view about this king, how much you like him or don't, or how and what you think is going to happen? Rajesh, would you get us started again?
Yeah, me? Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah. The king walked into the room.
Okay, thank you. And then is it Parna? Is that how I say your name?
Yes.
I apologize, and I will be really happy if those of you for whom your names are not my Marys and Johns and Davids, tell me how to say your name correctly with the correct expression.
Absolutely. You're right. And My name is
Uh-huh.
Aparna, and what would you have me say, Carol?
The king walked into a room with some attitude, some feeling about
okay.
it.
Now, I can include a word, or is it only the way I say it with a voice?
I just want you to say that sentence
Sentence.
with some empathy for the king, or some annoyance with the king, or whatever.
Okay. The king walked into that room.
Okay, thank you. Nina?
Aparna, can you possibly stabilize your camera? I'm getting a little dizzy as you're
Thank
walking
you.
around. Thank you.
The king walked into the room.
Yeah, okay. And
Uh,
Eric, do you want to?
my attitude is I'm afraid of what he's going to say. So it's the king walked into the room.
Yeah, right. So this is just a very simple difference, but I think you can hear the difference, can't you? I won't call on you, but you could put your hands up if you. When I'm asking you these questions, I'd be so grateful if you put your hands up. Yeah, well, I understand. Oh, I don't understand. It's so. When someone tells us a story, we don't have to embrace their attitude. But when they reveal their attitude, it gives us as listeners a place to start, because we follow the storyteller into the story. Doesn't mean we'll necessarily agree with what the storyteller chooses to emphasize, but we need to know what the storyteller thinks in order to embrace or reject it, and anything in between. Now, one of the things I want to say is I sort of speak in absolutes, and I do not believe that what I am saying is absolutely true. So I want you to know that I can't. I don't want to keep fudging. Well, it could be true, it could not. Understand that this is sort of what I like to say is you use your intelligence, you use your integrity, and then you just sin boldly. It doesn't mean you won't change your mind. And I change my mind often on how I'm telling a story based on what has happened to me as I've gone to that event. You know, if something bad happened, or it was particularly beautiful and it sent me into a reverie, or the traffic was terrible, whatever. Our moods as storytellers change, and that affects often how we tell a story. Story is not set in one. It's not frozen, which is why people were so upset when stories, in a way, long ago started being recorded, because then it became like, oh, that's the way you tell it. No, it's always a dance. It's a dance with ourselves and our own emotions, and it's a dance with those to whom we are speaking. But we make assessments when we see people. And I'm going to read, this is from Cynthia D. Felice's novel. She wrote called Lost Man's River. And I think what she demonstrates is that this is a process without negative overtones. She's talking about a boy who is looking at a man coming down the river towards his home. Quickly, without staring, I took in the details of the man's appearance. He was dressed commonly enough in shirt, hat, trousers, and galluses, but his clothes were a lot cleaner than those of most folks who came up the river. He didn't have the hard look of the plume hunter who came shooting birds for their fancy feathers, or the smell of gator skinners who killed crocodiles and alligators for their hides. He didn't act shifty and jumpy, the way moonshiners did, most of them, half crazy with drinking the liquor they made to sell. He wasn't a Seminole Indian or a black man either. So what was he doing? Pulling way up Lostman's River to where we had made our home. I just think it's a wonderful example of how somebody presents someone, the way we look at people, and we make an assessment. And it's so wonderful because there's this young man is not falling into prejudices, into in buying himself into stereotypes. He's noting there are these different stereotypes associated with moonshine and crocodile killing, and that people, when if it's a Seminole Indian, it's a black man. He's just saying this man isn't those things. So what is he? And I think it's a wonderful example of what we do. The word judgmental has a negative attitudes, but we make assessments regularly. People in our audiences make assessments about us as performers. I don't know. Am I going to follow her? Do I believe her? And we need to make assessments because that's how we protect ourselves. That's how we make decisions about what we are going to do or what we're not going to do. So for this exercise, I would like you to basically close your eyes. You don't have to write down the questions I'm going to ask you. Basically, I'm going to ask you questions that are so self-evident, but most of the time we just don't take the time. We don't take the time to do this. And so I'm going to probably be, my eyes are going to be kind of half closed because it's easier for me to see the questions if I have my eyes closed, rather than looking at all of you. And so I'd like you to think of a character in a story that you're working with. Now, this can be like, if it's a personal story, I tell stories about my father and how he smoked probably when he was 6 years old. 6 years old would have been 1911, a very different Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania than the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania I grew up in. But I didn't know my dad back then, and we have no pictures of my father back then. So you can work on someone who's real to you, maybe in a scene where you weren't there, or she was at an age, I didn't know my mom when she was a young woman participating in dance marathons. Those dance marathons, they had them during the Depression, and you would dance, and whoever still was on the dance floor at the end of days would win money. But if you fell down, or you couldn't go on, then you lost. So, or if it's a fairy tale or folklore for all the people in those stories, or if it's a literary story, I'll give you a perfect example of a literary story with two interpretations. There's a wonderful story called, and I have to say this, my friend Ellen Munns taught me that in her community, they say it takes a village to finish a sentence. So sometimes when you forget something, I think that's such a wonderful idea. It takes a village to finish this sentence. A story was written by Richard Kennedy, and it's called Come Again in the Spring. And I had learned the story, and my colleague, Connie Reagan Blake, had heard the story and worked on it. And Connie was telling it at the National Storytelling Festival. And as she's telling the story, I'm sitting there and I'm going, My husband leaned over and goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "She's telling it wrong." Now, I truly, truly, please understand me. She wasn't telling it wrong. The man in her story was not at all like the man in my version where I told it. The version she was telling is her old Hark was kind of a good old boy from the South in the southern part of the United States, so that he was heavy set and glib. He could talk to anybody about anything and a real open look on his face. And my old Hark is tall and thin and a Yankee sort of taciturn, and I supported this because Death speaks to him and Death asks him who he is. He says, "Are you old Hark?" And old Hark's response in my story is, "Maybe, maybe not." Hers was more, maybe, maybe not. No, my old Hark was putting up walls. He wasn't going to engage with Death. So this is what I mean by there's not one way to tell a story. You just need to know why you're telling it that way, because you need to know more about the character than what is given on the page. And this is an invitation to start exploring that. So if you would, I would like to invite you to close your eyes or semi-close your eyes. And this will work more easily if you are working with a human being. If you are working with a folktale where it's an animal, please remember any animal is there to reveal our all too human characters. So I hope the questions are about human beings. I hope you will consider working with a human being. Is there anybody who needs a little more time or wants me to talk more about that? I could get some illustrations from books of characters who are animals, but they're meant to be human beings. So a bear who walks upright and has a funny hat on or something. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Great. Thanks. Yeah. Thumb up or a hand or something. That's great. So I'm going to kind of be closing my eyes, and this will go on for quite a while. I'd like you to probably exhale and relax and think, "Oh my goodness, I came prepared to write things down, and instead this woman's asking me to fall into reverie." I am. I'm asking you not to write it down. I'm asking you to fall into reverie. And I'd like you to imagine, maybe after you exhale a couple times to just get settled, I'd like to ask you to imagine that you can see a character in a story that you are working on, and the character is at a distance far enough that you can really see them head to toe very comfortably. And I'd like you to look at them, and I'd like you to see, what is your first reaction like when you're looking at them? Are you smiling, or are you wary, curious? There's thousands of words. How do you feel when you first see them at a distance? And I'd like you to notice, when you look at them at a distance, how are their body proportioned? Their head and shoulders, chest and belly, hips and arms and legs. Is there anything that is quite distinctive about their general appearance, their proportions of their body, and what is the dominant color of what they are wearing or not wearing. And as the character walks towards you, I'd like you to notice how they walk. You know, is this someone I'll do this as an example. I got to see images of myself telling stories in Florida, and I got to confront that I am now moving like the 78-year-old woman I am. So what I noticed is I leaned my head forward, and I didn't just walk up onto the stage. I carefully stepped, looking to make sure I wouldn't fall. That was hard seeing myself that way, but it is what it is, you know? So how is this character walking? Exhibiting youthful exuberance, grace, clumsiness? You need to fill in the words because of what you see. And do they have anything distinctive about their walk or their approach? Then that might be distinctive because of a physical limitation. And as they come closer to you, I'd like you to look into their face, because isn't that where we reveal so much of who we are, is in our faces. So just as you noticed how their body was proportioned, I'd like you to notice what are the proportions of their face, their ears and jaw, mouth, cheekbones, nose, their eyes, their eyebrows and forehead. Is there something particularly pleasing or just distinctive and interesting about the proportions you see on their face? Particularly look at the eyes. You know, almost all of us, if you go and look at one half of our face or the other half of our face, one eye is more open, generally speaking, and the other's a little more closed. When you look at their eyes, you think, wow, this person looks at the world wide-eyed. Or you think, oh, look at how guarded they are. And they're often reveal this just by the muscles around the eyes that make someone narrow their eyes literally or hold them wide open. And I'd like you to notice the color of their skin, the texture of their skin. What do you know about them? What's a fair assessment that you can make about somebody when you look at the texture of their skin? Someone who is working outside, experiencing a lot of weather on their face, or are they just getting older and there's more wrinkles? Is their face smooth? Is it scarred? Is it painted in some way? It could be painted for, as in women's sort of makeup, but it also could be marked with cultural markings. So look at that face. When you're looking at their face, I'm going to say 5 emotions, and I will repeat them. I want you to look at their face and see which emotion plays over their face easily and which ones are more hidden. And how do you see what you see? So, how does this character show anger, joy, sorrow, fear, love? Which one of those feelings flitted across the face and which ones were not to be seen? Love, fear, sorrow, joy, anger. And then I'd like you to step back. And if you smile up at the character or down at the character, what's the response on their face? And if they smile, do they show their teeth? And if you look at their teeth, what kind of assessment do you make about their opportunities? Are their teeth a mess? Are their teeth uneven? Are they missing their teeth? Have they spent a lot of money on their teeth? And then step back so you're not quite so close to their face. And if you would imagine holding your hands out with your palms up, have them put their hand down onto yours. And I'd like you to look at the back of their hands. And just as you looked at the texture of the skin on the face, when you look at the back of this character's hand, what kind of judgments do you make about the kind of work or pampering this character knows? Do they bite their fingernails? Tear their cuticles? Are their hands smooth? Are their fingernails painted? And if you turn over their hands and you look at the palm, does it tell a different story? Or does it just reinforce what hard workers they are, maybe manual workers, or soft, puffy? And when their hands resting in yours, is their hand, where your hands come together? Are their hands moist or dry? And are they heavy? Or is it as light? What E.E. Cummings' wonderful line from the poem, no one ever had hands that small. When their hands in yours, what feelings do you personally experience? And then I'd like you to step back a little further so that you're looking at their clothing head to toe. Is there anything on their heads? How is their clothing, first of all, the dominant color or colors? How is it fastened? What kinds of sashes, belts, pins, zippers? What's holding their clothing together? And what does the quality of their clothing say about their economic, what indicators are there economically? Or what indicators are there about the kind of labor or work they do or don't do? How do they carry these clothes? Are you looking at someone who very self-consciously got up and got dressed in a presentational way for how they're going to look that day? Or is this somebody who got out of bed and just got dressed and got dressed for work, got dressed for play, got dressed to clean the house, to work in the field, to be in a lab. I don't know. There's all kinds of ways people just get up and casually throw on their clothes, which is very different than people who get up and very self-consciously dress. Look at their feet. What do they have on their feet? Anything? And is there any decoration? What does their footwear say about the environment they live in? What does their footwear say about their economy, their job opportunities? Are these fancy shoes for playing, or these are shoes for working? And then I want you to ask the character just to stay where they are, but you're going to go around them. So when you first move around them and look at them from the side, remember how you looked at their body and how it was proportioned? So if you're looking from the side, does their head jut forward, as I saw mine doing the other day, or their shoulders, their butt? Is the butt forward, or is the butt sort of sticking out the back a lot in terms of posture? Is it tucked in? I saw somebody who had been rolfed, I guess, and honestly, I never saw anyone so clearly. Their body looked like they were being held, their head held up on the string, and their body was like hanging loosely. It was so attractive. It made me realize how much tension is usually in my body and the body of my people around me, how much I notice it. And then if you'll walk around to the back of the person, a lot of times people will have their hair sort of fixed in the front, but you look in the back and my goodness, their hair's a mess. What's the texture of their hair? And the color of their hair? And the length or style? And again, is this someone who very consciously fixed their hair, or their hair's higgledy-piggledy, a mess? Is it covered so you can't see their hair? What's covering their hair? What does that indicate about who they are? And if you noticed how the tension was when you looked at them from the front, if you're looking at them from the back, I'll use an example. Sometimes if you stand behind someone who's a singer, here they are, people who are in the audience looking at them think how effortlessly they're singing. But when you're behind them, you can see how much effort is going into the breathing and their tension and their posture. And go around to the other side. Is there anything you notice on this side that you didn't notice on the other? And come around to the front. I would like you to thank this character for letting you look at them so closely and be with them. And again, I would ask you, how do you feel about this character? And if you turn and you start to walk with them, what do you notice differently about their gait, their walk? Are their strides long or short? And why? Why do you think that would be? And do they talk while they're walking, or are they walking silently? Are they walking, looking down, looking out, glancing at you? Just what do you notice about how they walk and when they're walking with you? And if they speak, I'm going to just give you a second here, try and have a conversation. I'd like you to notice the volume at which the character speaks, the pitch or tone of their voice, how quickly or slowly and deliberately they speak. Or does the mouth just go, they're just talking really quickly? Are they looking at you when they're talking to you? Do they keep glancing at you? And I'd like you to have the character enter a space related to the story. If you were already inside, have them go outside. And if you are outside, which is where I was thinking the character was, have them go inside. And I do love this question. Are they dwarfed by a space or do they fill it? And what's the first thing they start to do when you change the setting? And now we're just going to have you thank them, and you can breathe and you can come back to the room. And I hope you will open your eyes. So, we lost so many people, I'm sure. people, it's like we all want to, this is the time for stories and to fall into reverie. And it's like, nah. So I hope all of you, I don't know, Eric, is Eric around to know how we could go into a, how many are you? 4, 8, 12, 13. Can we break into, can people pair up into a room, or does it need to be like 3 or 4 people so that they would have time to share what they saw?
Well, there are 14 people in this meeting,
Yeah.
but only about half of us have our cameras on. I hesitate to put people in rooms if they have their cameras off because
Okay.
maybe in the kitchen or something.
Okay.
So the people who are here, we could have one room with 3 people and one room with 2 people,
Okay.
and then you and I and the people who have their cameras turned off will just stay here and do something else.
Okay. Well, we can read what the people who have their cameras off or want to write into the chat.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, let me just make 2 rooms now. Jeff, I guess, turned his camera off. Okay, here we go.
So please let me see if there's 3 people in a room. So we'll take like 9 minutes. So each person has a good 3
No,
minutes.
there are going to be 2 people in a room.
Oh, 2 people. Oh, it's even better. Oh, well, we'll still have, each person can have like 4 minutes to talk about what, I'll turn on my clock for a timer so that one of you talk for 4 minutes, the other talk, and tell each other what you saw. Okay?
Okay, so people are you clear on what you're doing in the rooms? Yep, good.
You
Okay,
get to talk.
here we go.
Okay.
Okay, here we are with
Okay.
our invisible people.
Oh, here we are. Stopwatch. Okay.
Should we pause the recording or shall we keep the recording going?
I guess you can pause the recording. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. There we are. All right. Well, welcome back. So I would like to know if you would be willing to share what you found out that you didn't know. Oh, yes. Rajesh?
Uh,
How do I say your name correctly, first of all?
It's Rajesh. Rajesh.
Okay. So it's like, okay, Rajesh. Okay. What did you find out?
I found. Are you talking about like me finding out something about my chat
What?
mate's story?
Oh,
Or
just how was that exercise for you? What did you find out about this character you envisioned? Anything?
Oh, that I told my how do I say? I told Aparna now what I felt. I mean, in fact, I was very traumatized by imagining this character, because it was like half imagined and half seen when I was a child. So and I could see her sorrows and grief, and it was unbearing. I couldn't bear that. So it was very strong.
And
Old woman in a very dry landscapes, and she goes through really big hardship, and it's not nice. Yeah.
oh, okay. Someone else? What did you discover? Aparna, Nina, someone?
Okay. I imagine my grandmother on Ellis Island in 1918, who was delayed there for a year because of medical stuff.
Wow.
And so it made me reflect more about resilience. She was just 18 years old, and stuck in a hospital kind of setting. And I guess if anything, the exercise, enabled me to explore not just her physical aspects, but her emotional aspects.
Right. Oh, good. Good. Anise, is that your name?
Hi, yes, that's my name, Anis. Thank you. I just saw my mother, and I saw her in a completely contrasting character as I know her in real life.
Right.
Yeah, I know her as a very meek and a quiet person, and I saw her I saw her as a very carefree, sort of mischievous teenager.
Wow.
With a great sense of fashion and huge big earrings and a big nose ring and heels, and yeah, something that I haven't seen her in real life. So yeah,
Okay.
and then yeah, we walked together, and we entered a house at some point, and when she entered the house, although she tried to be the same person, I could still feel a little flinch, and her demeanor changed a little bit. Her shoulders drooped, and there was a little bit of shush shush in her tone, and it felt that we have entered a place where she is sort of expected to, or maybe I am sort of expected to observe some discipline and not be that carefree. So yeah.
Interesting. Parna?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Carol. I thought it was a really, really powerful exercise, and
You're
oftentimes
welcome.
we don't. Yeah, oftentimes I don't think we spend so much of time unraveling our characters, and it was to me a very revealing exercise. In the sense that so here's what I did. I guess it was because you made a reference to a king sometime earlier in your talk,
Right.
and that image just stuck. And there is a from the Indian mythology, there is a Ramayana is one of our biggest epics, and
Yes.
Rama, who is the protagonist, his father is called Dashrath, and he's a king, and so it was him would come to my mind, and the engagement that I had with him as a king was one. It was, of course, very immersive, and I think the biggest thing that came through to me through this exercise was how oftentimes we make a character very linear, and this is who the character is, and he's a proud king, so we
Right.
just kind of stereotype, and
Right.
just the act of spending time with your character and getting into close touch and literally in touch with your character really reveals a multi-dimensional way. And the closer I got to him, the closer I saw the worry lines, for example, or the bags under his eyes, which were
Yes.
showed the responsibilities that he was shouldering. And also it almost helped me understand him in ways where he is not necessarily just the king who was trapped by his wife, which is what happened. He had to let go of his son because he had promised his wife something. So, I had a certain judgment. You were talking of judgments.
Right.
I had a certain judgment of him. And that judgment is now questionable to a certain degree. Yeah. So it was definitely
Yeah.
a very revealing exercise and a
Well,
multi-layered exercise.
yeah. I don't think I don't tell people all the stuff I discovered about somebody. It just changes when this is my best example. I used to have two women on either side of where my husband and I live, both named Margaret. You don't even know me, but if you were walking down towards my home and I said to you, "Oh, this is my neighbor, Margaret," or I said to you, "Oh, this is my neighbor, Margaret," you would know how I felt about them, even being polite. I'm being polite. You would still know that I held this woman at some distance, and not because I worked in a mirror to make myself look that. What I want people to realize is to get in touch with our feelings that then shape how we say what we say. Not that you spell it out for the audience, but they will know by the way you shrugged your shoulders, leaned, smiled, got kind of still and frozen. They will know lots about how to, if I'm going to follow you, this is where you're taking me, and this is what you're telling me to watch out for or to embrace. And I think it adds endless dimension because it's not learning the story in just some mechanical way. And I don't sit down normally and do this with my eyes closed like we just did here. I do it while I'm washing dishes. I have a real problem when, like, I have stories with 8-year-old boys in them. I keep trying to make them different 8-year-old boys because people can get a shtick. Oh, this is my 8-year-old boy. Oh, you really see it. I'm 78. You really see it in an elderly woman. Oh, suddenly we're just, leaning over and our heads are shaking and things. We'd become geriatric beetles creeping along. Although I did see myself creeping up on that stage. So I'm
You
going to have
certainly
to,
don't.
yeah, I'm going to have to practice walking sort of very boldly. But if we lined up 8 old ladies, they would not of 878-year-old women, you'd see all kinds of postures and clothing, and they would radiate different kinds of attitudes. My favorite thing is I had one of those grandmothers. She died when I was 3. So to me, she was always sort of that fairy grandmother with backlit, her white hair illuminated, being backlit, and sitting in a much washed dress with an apron, her foot tapping in time to music only she could hear. And but if you ask my nieces and nephews about their grandmother, they're talking about my mother with her, green silk suit that she wore to a wedding and her earrings, and my mother would dance so long that she could hardly walk when it was time to leave. Those are both grandmothers. But so many times people their story with stereotypical anything, just, and they don't think about how they feel. So the person, see, when somebody is real to us, we have a whole range of opinions and attitudes and appreciation and lack of appreciation for them that we just naturally reveal if we get out of our way. But people turn a character into an ought to, and we kind of freeze and we stop playing with them. So like one of my favorite things I love to do is like when Red Riding Hood knocks on her grandmother's door, my Red Riding Hood goes, "Grandma? Grandma, are you there? Grandma, tell me where you are." Which is very different than saying, "Grandma, are you there? Grandma, tell me where you are." Right? Yes, thank you. So because I like to hear stories where somebody sounds like they are talking to me. Now, I was just telling a very lush Victorian fairy tale called The Wooing of the Maze. And there's a line in The Wooing of the Maze that it says, "Rejected potentates went clamoring to the four winds of heaven." I stopped and said, now, potentates is not a word we hear often. So it's not like I only say things in a conversational way. That sentence demands a kind of kingly presence just by virtue of the language. Rejected potentates. Ugh. But the rest of the story is, and if you have learned a story, but you are at its mercy in terms of it being too, I keep trying to find the word for lowering a voice. And I don't mean lowering a voice in terms of volume. I mean lowering a voice in terms of approach, moving towards an intimate voice. So one way to move towards an intimate voice is to gossip the story, and gossip has a bad connotation, although I see somebody just wrote a book on how important gossip is. Not gossip meaning mean, but that eagerness. We've had deaths in our storytelling community lately, and we get together. We're not gossiping about negative things, but it's like, have you heard? Oh, first this happened and then that. There's just so much compassion in when people are speaking. And if you're really having trouble getting a story you have learned or worked on to sound more relaxed, lie down and tell the story. You can't, I don't think you just can't do what you do when you're in your presentational mode. You can't make those sounds kind of when you're lying down telling a story to a friend. I almost always think in terms of telling a story, not to one person in the audience, but really that I am speaking to someone. And the other thing is we always do this sort of inhale and begin. Once there was blah, blah, blah. And it changes completely if you ask yourself silently, once there was. Do you hear the complete shift in the energy? So if I'm having trouble with a word, or I will often set it up with a question. Which character? Janet came in, because if you're telling a friend that Janet came in, you don't go, Janet came into, you don't do it. And I struggle with finding the best descriptive word to talk about what that difference is. Well, we only have 3 more minutes, as far as I know, together. Is there anything you would like to ask me? We were going to do this on character, and then we were going to do this on setting, but I guess I just went too long with the talking about character. But I do this with the setting.
So I have a question,
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
So now my question is this, and I'm going to try and frame the question.
Okay.
So now what I hear you say is, what is your relationship with your character, right? And what is your relationship? How do you see your character, and how do you empathize, and so forth? My question is that, an authored story has an author's perspective, which already has a certain level of judgments and perceptions that the author has. Right
Yes,
now,
absolutely.
yeah. And then there are folk tales also, or mythological stories also, which have a certain import.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
now the question I have is, now how authentic are we to the story and the story's intent and ethos when we are getting so in touch with the characters and possibly, drawing our own ways forward. You see what I mean?
Yes. Well, that tells the difference way Connie Reagan Blake and I tell this, although I don't think either one of us tells it anymore. Come Again in the Spring. Here she had this man. The only one who knows how that man is Richard Kennedy, who wrote the story.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So we don't know Richard's intent, really. I would support my decisions based on his terse answers. And, and she would, I don't know how but neither one of us is wrong. But I know what you mean. Making it personal doesn't mean you just get to ignore like a religious story and what that means.
The character's identity also.
Right. It just means that you're talking to people who are sitting in front of you. So you want them to follow and meet this character. It's not so you can look clever. It's so that they will feel welcomed into the story. I think. It's like that. Yeah, that's really a big difference. So it's 11:30. I think Eric's been at work all day, all night.
Yeah.
I appreciate you daring to do it, because it is it's just, and like I said, I do this when I'm doing things like dusting and laundry and washing dishes. I really think, how do I feel about this character? Why do I feel that way? Well, what do they look like? Well, where did I get that? I do. Oh, that's a good thing to say, Aparna. I do say, where do I get that? And does the text support it, especially in great epics or literary sources? I mean, yeah. Where?
Yeah.
Is it? I don't want to distort things, but I do want the people who are in front of me to be welcomed into it somehow.
I think that's great. And I think that's essential. Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question here, and it's related to the question that you asked, Aparna. Is it wrong to sort of is it ethically wrong to change the version of the author, or even if it's a fable or a mythology? Because when my last trip to India, I stumbled upon a book which is called Sita's Ramayana. and it talks the whole epic is the way Sita looks at her life, and yeah, so it's from Sita's perspective rather.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And then there's a lot of change there in the story. I mean, not the story as such, but the value that we accord to that mythology. So I'm just wondering here and trying to identify if it would be wrong to interpret it differently, to see from the villain's perspective or from the other character's perspective, and then there's a change in the shift. There's a shift in the way you see the whole story and who the protagonist is finally, because Sita's Ramayana sort of makes Sita.
I can't tell you that. I don't like to think in terms of right and wrong. I like to think of in terms of what's effective for the people sitting in front of me, knowing, hearing, experiencing the story. But I don't know the answer. That is an ethical question you need to wrestle with, it sounds like.
I take a note from Kurosawa's movie Rashomon, where there's a murder that takes place and they interview like 7 different people, and each person has a different version of what they saw.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times we're not violating anything by presenting another perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of how you hold it. But I mean, I think when if you're sitting in front of an audience that believes something very, and you just come in and say, well, I don't believe what you believe, so you just get all kinds of problems. So anyway, thank you very much, Eric. I'm sorry that we're running over, but thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Carol, very much.
Cold and sunny here today. I mean, bitter cold. There's so many people who are complaining. I think we're going to get above freezing today. It's been below freezing during the day. I love it.
It's warm. It's warm and muggy here today.
So thank you.
Hey,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karan.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Eric.